Today is March 30th, 2015. My name is Victoria Neidig. We are interviewing Roderick Eyer, an Army veteran during the Vietnam era, here at the Half Hollow Hills Community Library. It is part of the library's Veterans Testimonial Project in collaboration with the Library of Congress's Veterans History Project. Thank you so much, Rod, for being here today and participating in our project.
It's great to be here.
I'm going to start off with some questions. Where and when were you born?
I was born September 1st, 1945 in Erie, Pennsylvania.
Who were your parents and what were their occupations?
Parents, my father's name is Roderick, and my mother's name is Florence Fisher. My dad he was a businessman. He had a very successful trucking firm, a gas station, and a bar and a restaurant. So that was my background growing up.
Did you have any siblings?
I did.
If so, can I have the names and genders?
Yeah, I had two sisters, Sally Ann, another sister, Linda, and a brother, Bruce.
Were any of them served in the military? Did any of them serve?
No.
Before you entered the service, what were you doing?
High school. I joined the Army right out of high school. I was accepted into college. I took weekend classes, did not like it. Became very confused. All my life I had wanted to go to college to be an artist. So I thought joining the military might help me sort things out. And it was a good time to join, 1963. Nothing was going on in the world.
How old were you when you joined?
17.
What branch of the service did you serve?
Army.
Did you enlist or were you drafted?
Enlisted.
Since you enlisted, why did you choose that specific branch of the military?
To be honest with you, the Army seemed to be the least disciplined of all the armed services. The Marines were a little bit scary to me. The Army, I think at the time the Air Force and the Navy wanted 4 years, which to me, being 17, 4 years was an eternity. The Army seemed like a pretty good deal for 3 years. And when I joined, I took some tests, and they were going to send me as a draftsman, because I had an art background and had studied drafting in high school. So they assured me that I was going to be a draftsman drawing maps at the Presidio in California. But that's not what happened.
Okay, so what happened when you departed for training camp?
Nothing really. We flew to South Carolina. We went in for basic training. Most of the sergeants were World War II veterans or Korean conflict veterans, so they were tough. I still remember their names. But to me, it was like a big summer camp. I was 17. I was in really good shape. Being from Pennsylvania, I was very proficient with firearms. And so to me, it was just like a big cakewalk.
You said you remember their names. Can you share?
Sergeant Riley was my platoon sergeant, a very nice guy. And what they called the field first, he was the sergeant in charge of all of the platoons. His name is Sergeant Tatera, and he was an SOB, Vince Lombardi type of guy, always screaming, and but you got used to it. He always wanted all of us to go into the infantry, because it would make men of us, it would make us tough. So
Did you?
No, I did not, no.
Did you receive any specialized training, and if so?
It was air defense. I was evaluated to be a draftsman, and then I scored high in science and math, and they sent me to radar school. So I had almost a year's training in electronics. For the Hawk missile system, and that was in El Paso, Texas.
How did you adapt to military life, including the physical, the barracks, the food, the social life, all of that?
I had no problem. To me, it was just like I said before. To me, it was like a big summer camp. It was. I actually thought it was fun.
Where did you serve?
I served. Basic training was Columbia, South Carolina. And then I had nearly a year's training in electronics at Fort Bliss, Texas. And it was a wonderful place to be. It was like a college campus. We carried our passes in our wallet so you could leave base anytime. come back when you felt like it. You know, it was really, really good. So the El Paso, and then when I went to Korea, I was stationed at a very tiny outpost called Bien, and it was spelled Biin, and it was a little, dirty little patch of nothing. I was there for 3 months. It was a horrible place. Completely in contrast with Fort Bliss. You know, the only highlight there was that the actor Raymond Burr came to visit us one time, and that was a big thing. But it was a very tough place. The first sergeant had a nervous breakdown, and we had a former Army Ranger who had transferred over to electronics. They called for him to come down off of what we called the mountain. That's where they kept the radars. And he had to go down, and he had to physically subvert this sergeant, you know, who became very, very violent. We had a commanding officer who had a drinking problem. So it was like that. You know, it was a very, very harsh reality. And that was for 3 months, and then I was transferred to the DMZ in Korea. And that's north of Seoul.
What's the DMZ?
DMZ is the Demilitarized Zone. And that's what they also call a forward area. That was basically about as close to combat as you can get. We had infiltrators, we had roving gangs, we had some Army personnel deserted. They went over to the North Korea side. It was a very, very difficult time, but the good thing about it was that there was a lot more camaraderie in that type of situation.
Do you have any other memories while you served abroad? Good, bad, in between?
Oh, lots of memories. Oh, yes. You know, I remember all of it. Like people always talk about veterans, always talking about how they remember it like yesterday, and that was Korea for me. It was one of the biggest memories. Of course, was as I mentioned before, Bob Hope. I brought a copy of the story I wrote about it, and my friend of mine and I, in transit to our new duties, were basically shanghaied by the 7th Infantry Division to walk guard duty on Bob Hope's Christmas platform. In the process, this is in the wintertime, they lost our luggage, they lost our pay envelopes, we had no protection against the cold, and by the time it was finished, we burned most of the wood on the platform to keep warm. And when we were offered tickets to front row seats for the show, we said, "Oh, thank you. We hate Bob Hope. We had nothing to do with him," and we were both listed as AWOL because they had no idea. You know, this whole thing was a fiasco. It was a big embarrassment for the Army at that time. The Inspector General, who was a big shot, pardon me, was called in to investigate. We were both exonerated. There were a lot of red faces when it was finished, and you know, so yeah, that was a big memory. It's fun now looking back on it. You know, we laugh at it. You know, at the time it was going on, it was not very funny.
How long were you considered AWOL?
I don't know, probably a week. When it had a happy ending, and then they figured we got special meals, you know, and they treated us like we were heroes. You know, but I did not get to meet Bob Hope.
Changing direction a little bit, if you were on the front lines, what kind of combat or action did you witness?
Wasn't on the front line. On the DMZ, that's like I said before, it's a forward area. The DMZ is very, very tough. We were the next infantry unit attached to us was called the First Cavalry Unit. They eventually went to Vietnam. Their soldiers, we would see them occasionally. We would go to a PX area. They had movie theaters, things like that, and they were very agitated because the stress was phenomenal. They were a few yards away from the North Korean counterpart, and they were constantly throwing rocks at each other, cursing at each other. You know, the tension was really, really bad. When I first went to that area of Korea, they played Frank Sinatra night and day. The Koreans did. Night and day. This went on for about a month.
The song Night and Day? Or continued night and day?
They kept singing continuously night and day, 24 hours. And the idea was that when they stopped playing the music, they were going to attack. And of course, one night it got very quiet. And we were like, oh my God, they stopped playing. They're going to attack. And of course, they didn't. They were always having skirmishes. They were having, we were sniped at a couple times. We were told that that year, 1964, 65, 60 Americans had been killed from a sniper attack or ambushes, things of that nature. We had a couple incidents where we had infiltrators come into our tack site on the mountain. Then we had exchange of gunfire like that. Things like that, you know. It was very, very tough.
What were some of your specific duties?
I was a radar technician. At that time, everybody had a number. They changed the number since then. At that time, it was called 226. And on a tack site, that meant that I pretty much ran the whole tack site. We had, of all the components on the radar site, I ran probably about 80% of them. The main radar was my responsibility. It was called a pulse acquisition radar. If you drive by an airport, that's the big antenna that's constantly going around. So you have that radar, the range-only radar. So if you were jammed, you could always detect the range of any incoming aircraft. Battery Control Central, which is the brains of the entire tack site. The Assault Fire Command Console, which was a portable version of that. Excuse me. We had the early warning radar, which later became also my responsibility. So it was really, really busy. And the big problem was that the equipment at that time had a high failure rate. So it was always in need of maintenance. Something was always breaking. And of course, they improved on that over the years. But it was stressful in that the radars had to be going, or in theory, were supposed to be going all the time in case we came under air attack. We figured out later, of course, I took a leave and went to Seoul one weekend, and I went to the headquarters, and I saw the giant map of Korea, and they had this big yellow line going all the way across the DMZ, and our TAC unit was right there in that yellow line. So I asked one of the officers, "What does that yellow line mean?" He said, "Well, that means delayed action." Well, what's a delayed action means? He said, "Well, everybody in this yellow zone here, they're going to be sacrificed in the event of an attack." So we figured out pretty much that the North Koreans knew where we were, and if they did decide to attack, they would have probably used artillery on us first. It would not have been an air attack at all. So, but we did our jobs, and kept the radars going as much as we could. Most of the problems we had mechanically with the radars, nothing that you were taught in school. These were all strange problems. And I think what saved me was the fact that I was able to solve the problems because it was all out of the box thinking. You had to really think outside the box to solve the problem. Textbook didn't help most of the time. I fixed one radar. One time I was at we had two bases. We had the attack site where the radars were, and about 10 miles away we had the administrative area. And I was at the administrative area one time and had to fix the radar by telephone because we had rioting going on in the streets. Something bad had happened, so all the civilians were rioting, so we were trapped on the administrative side. The radar went down. We had a new replacement, couldn't figure out what to do. So I got on the telephone. This is the old crank phone. You had the wheel, you had to crank it up like this, and yelling instructions, and I actually talked him through the entire radar because I had memorized the entire circuitry. I had a really good memory at that time. So I talked him through, he solved the problem, so I was a hero for a day. Like that.
You had mentioned before that while you were over there, you'd found out there were approximately 60 people who were killed. Were you ever injured?
No. We think we were sniped at one time. February, we were working on top of the radar. We had to do some maintenance on the antenna. And I was working with another guy, and he kept complaining about the bees. He said, "These bees are really getting on my nerves." I said, "Yeah, we hear the buzzing of a bee." And then it dawned, well, of course, there are no bees in February. So he said, "Oh my God, those are bullets." So that's what we think they were, I don't know what else it could be. And I think it was probably about 20 years later, I woke up in the middle of the night, and I thought, you know what? If those were bullets, I think they were deliberately missing us, and they were doing it just to, to play games, so it was always like that, But at the time, we never really thought about it. We were 19 years old, and we didn't really think about it.
Earlier you had mentioned that there was a lot of camaraderie. What kind of friendships and anything like that while you were serving over there? And do you remember their names? Do you keep in contact with them?
I remember some of their names. My biggest one was Jim Murphy. We went through electronic school together. We kept bumping into each other. I would get on an airplane in Chicago. Jimmy Murphy would be on the plane. We took a ship over to Korea. Instead of flying over, we took a ship, the SS Patrick. We ended up in Hawaii, spent my 19th birthday in Hawaii. We went to Guam together, and we just had dinner last night. So he lives in Union, New Jersey. Everywhere we went in the Army, we were, except basic training, and we just got to be the best of buddies. We hit it off, and yeah, like that.
Did you do anything that you regretted?
Did I do anything I regretted? Not really. No, I was a good soldier. When I was in Korea, everybody had girlfriends. I did not have any participation with that. I left out. I wanted to be left alone. I pretty much spent my time in Korea. If not in the administration area, I was on that tax site working. I got to be pretty good at it.
How did you stay in touch with your family and friends back home?
Occasional letter, and that was about it.
What did you do for recreation when you were off duty?
Pretty much spent my time at the library. And I really, like I said before, I spent most of my time on that tax site, and downtime would be on the library, just reading. We also had participation, Karen will love this, we had visitation by the USO, and we called them donut dollies. And very, very nice young ladies. They would bring coffee and donuts and games and stuff like that. We'd watch a movie, things like that. And it's a lot of fun.
Where were you when the war ended? I don't know if this applies to you.
Yeah, it doesn't really apply. Mm-hmm. I did 13 months in Korea. That was standard at that time. And I think that was standard procedure for Vietnam as well, which has been criticized by a lot of experts, saying, you go into combat, especially Vietnam, you would go into a place like Vietnam and you got really, really familiar with the whole terrain and what your mission was there. And then after 13 months, you'd go back home and they'd bring somebody fresh in who doesn't know anything. Korea, probably the same thing. It was a really hard tour of duty. When I came back to El Paso, people treated you with respect. If you had been stationed stateside, which some technicians were, they spent their time in Florida or New York Air Defense Command, were not treated with any type of respect at all. Korea was a tough tour of duty. So if you did Korea, people respected you for that. We left in September. One of my crazy memories, we left September 10th from Kimpo Air Base in Korea. We left at 5 p.m.
What year was that?
1965. We left at 5 p.m. We left Kimpo Air Base. We landed in Los Angeles at 10 a.m. on the same day. so which is really, really strange. And when I got back home to Pennsylvania, it was now 5 p.m. again. So it was like a really, really strange event there.
How were you received by your family and the community?
After Korea, when I got home, we had a big party. In fact, that was about the only time my family really had a big party like that. They were so happy I got home.
Family and friends, but how about the community?
Nobody really cared. Vietnam wasn't going on at that point in time. It had just started, really, and but nobody really paid attention.
You had said how did you get from home how did you get to Texas and then to LA? How did all that happen?
Just by air travel.
Okay.
Back then it was a little bit different. They didn't have direct flights. Coming back from Korea, it was Los Angeles to Chicago to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and then by bus. So Or if we're going back to El Paso, for instance, I took a plane from Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, to Philadelphia, to Chicago, to Texas. So it was like that.
How did you feel when you came home?
When I was finished with my 3 years, I had a hard time adjusting. I really did. I had a lot of anger. I don't know why I did. I think a lot of veterans had some anger and some confusion, and you're leaving one type of structured life to something that really was not that structured. I was picking fights with people. I was 20 years old, and the Army asked me. They actually contacted me, wanted me to come back in, and which I said no, thank you. The Army recruiter brought me over to the recruiting station, and I told him if I can go back to my original job assignment as a draftsman, I'll talk to you about that. But they said, no, we want you as a technician. You did a good job, and we want you to do that. We need that. And they wanted me, then I got another letter from the Army. They wanted me to go to we called it the DO line at that time. When you join the Army, they do all kinds of tests. They do psychological testing, everything. And they finally got around to reading my psychological profile, and they said you would fit perfectly into the Alaskan DO line because our tests indicate that you like cold and you like darkness. So as we now know, we talk about this we laugh about it now because I love it when it's cold and gray overcast skies. I love it. I do my best work at night. And so the Army, for once, the Army had it right, and I probably should have, and I would have enjoyed that, but I didn't do it.
What did you do after you were done with your military connections?
Just started my career, started a newspaper career, and then I got sidetracked, and I went into advertising, and eventually the advertising got me back into newspapering. I left Pennsylvania, went to Middletown, New York, pursuing my newspaper career. That's where I met her, and then from Middletown, New York, I went to the Bergen County Record, and then from there to the New York Daily News, and then eventually to Newsday.
Have you remained in contact or reunited with fellow veterans besides the gentleman that you had mentioned before?
No.
Are you a member currently or in the past of any veterans organizations?
I joined the VFW. Only because I kept getting mailings to join the VFW. I never went to one. I've never been to the only VFW hall I went to was the one in where is it, babe? That's at Wheatley Heights. And I went there because there was a union meeting, and they had it at the VFW. It's the only time I ever went in. I wanted nothing to do with the VFW, American Legion, nothing. And I knew a lot of people who joined them who weren't even in the military. And that always was a sore point with me. But really, I did my military service. I wanted nothing to do with it anymore. I lost all my medals. Over the years, all my uniforms disappeared, and the only thing, I saved a bunch of photographs. And I saved my dog tags. And, but I really never really paid attention to it other than telling Karen war stories about Korea. It's only been the last couple of years I began thinking maybe it's time to, make write this down and keep a record of it.
You mentioned medals. Can you tell us what medals you
Well,
received?
nothing spectacular. The only thing I really liked, I was a really good shot, and so I lost my expert rifle badge. I lost my expert missile badge. I earned that, and you can't even get them anymore. When I left the Army, I had to requalify with the rifle, but I didn't really care. I was just really taking half shots, so I didn't get, I qualified as a sharpshooter, but I lost that medal as well, so maybe at some point I'm going to get those medals back. Since then, I found out that I should be receiving the Good Conduct Medal, the Korea Defense Medal, National Service Medal, things like that, very simple things, nothing really heavy.
I know we talked about it a little bit a couple of moments ago, but can you give us some more information about what you did after with your personal life after you left the military?
I got married, got divorced, and just pursued my newspaper career. I think that's pretty much it. Would you say? Yes.
How did your wartime experience affect your life?
Military, to me, I think it was just the discipline. I think the military discipline is something that I enjoyed. Many times when I was in the Army, I felt that they weren't tough enough, and they weren't. We just went to an art show last weekend, and Les Payne was there. He's a former columnist for Newsday. He was in the Army. He was stationed at Fort Bliss the same time I was, and in a different missile program. He was talking about how when he did go to Vietnam, and he was amazed at how unprofessional the Army was, because the Marines and the Air Force, and they all had professional PR organizations and professional support systems. And the Army, and this was my experience at the set, that even though I was a teenager at the time, seemed to be completely unorganized and unprofessional. Especially when I was in Korea, things I saw there with senior staff sergeants, many of the officers, was shocking. A lot of them were ROTC graduates. We had contempt for many of them. I think, having a really good memory of this, I remember one of the Lieutenant Hicks, I remember him, was the only officer there that I knew that at the battery level who was competent. And we had a warrant officer there who was very competent. But the rest of them they were clueless about how the TAC site worked, knew nothing about the radars. It was really pathetic. No leadership skills. Excuse me. We had a Major Studelmeyer who was from Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, and so he and I were kindred spirits because we came from the same area of Pennsylvania. He was very, very competent. But I found that my experience was that the Army really at that time was amateurish.
Do you have any, or did you have any life lessons that you learned from your time in the military?
Life lessons, I really can't think of any.
How has your military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
My personal feeling is that war is always going to be part of human existence. Some people love it. Whether you love it or hate it, it is with us. It will always be part of our existence. So I always tell people we should be aware of it, especially history. Talking to Edna before about this, people need to be educated more about the history of warfare. This entire country was founded on warfare. Military, in my opinion, the military, of course, the soldiers now are a lot better than they were when I was in the Army. At that time, really took the dredges. It took a lot of people in that who would not have qualified for Air Force or the Marine Corps. I think that's changed. I think the recruits coming in now are better educated. They're certainly a lot tougher in some areas. However, I do read reports that the kids coming into basic training now can't even do a push-up. They now have the basic training is very soft. This is what I've been told. Reveille's not 4:30 in the morning anymore, as it was for me. We got up at 4:30. We had to run a mile, and we had to do physical training. We had to do push-ups, which I loved. And kids coming in now, they are experts on cell phone technology, but they can't really physically compete. They have, I understand they have stress cards that they're able to put a stress card up. They need to take a break, and which, whether that's true or not, I find that to be incomprehensible. Leadership, again, I listened to the generals talking on television about the unending war in Afghanistan and Iraq, and it just it infuriates me. It's the same thing that we listened to when I was in Korea. I think many of them really don't have a clue. They lack strategy, in my opinion. I watched the hearings over General Petraeus, who I think is a total jerk. He went to a dinner meeting wearing a suit, a regular civilian suit, but he managed to put all of his medals on a suit, which is really, he should have been arrested for being out of uniform. It was his ego was so out of control. I think all of them, they're just all they want to do is wage war. But there's really no, in my opinion, no real strategy to deal with the problems facing us right now.
What message would you like to leave for future generations that will hear this interview?
I think everybody in this country should serve in the military in some capacity. I think you're in a college level, even if it's just a part-time thing, even if it's just a 6-month tour of duty, if you want to call it that, some type of training like they do in Israel. In Israel, my understanding is that all the kids there are involved in the military in some capacity because they have to defend themselves. And I think that if that became part of a regular curriculum at the high school level, at the very least, it would still discipline. And I think American kids need to be disciplined. There's no discipline from what I can see. And it would teach them some more respect. I think that too many people in this country who did not serve in the military really are ignorant about our past. And it really is true, if you're ignorant of the past, you're doomed to repeat it.
Is there anything else that we haven't discussed that you want to discuss more? Or if we did touch upon it, you want to speak about it more? Anything else?
No, I think we're fine. I wrote down on the form there are a few things that you can look at later. You get a kick out of. It was some technical issues on the radar sites that people should have been aware of. And the Bob Hope Christmas show, there's a story here. You can read it later at your leisure and get a laugh out of it. But that's pretty much it.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for your time, Ron.
Thank you.